Welcome to the Beyond Cinema Studio presented by CELEBS.com up here at Sundance. Danai Gurira, Isaach de Bankole. Firstly, congratulations on this film, Mother of George. The review that was just posted by Variety, I know you read it just a moment ago as well, is kind of poetic and fantastic. A, do you kind of care about those sorts of things? I mean, it must feel nice to have a sort of warm reception to something that you've poured some personal work into. But how does that feel kind of the morning after in Sundance when you kind of get a review like that?
I haven't read it.
Yeah, yeah, I read it, and I mean, it feels good.
Yeah.
Of course, it's always good to read, nice things about your work. But beyond that, it's my memory rely on what the screening yesterday,
Yeah.
and the audience, the response to the movie, and I felt good after the screening. That
Had you seen the film before? In its
no,
entirety?
before. It was the first time yesterday with the audience, so I wanted to wait with the audience to see the movie.
Are you good at watching yourself on screen?
Oh yeah. I have a distance now, after some 30 years. But especially the reaction of the people inside,
Yeah.
and after.
And Danai, for you, I mean, working with Andrew, this being a second time now, is it a different relationship you have with him as kind of actor-director?
Yeah, it's stemmed now into siblings, which is great. We can just basically talk about everything and really be very honest with each other, which I think is, a gift and doesn't happen all the time.
What is it about his work? Because obviously Restless City, which he kind of made quickly, as opposed to this, which has taken some time to ruminate, came out and instantly, struck a chord, even though it was something that perhaps was not his passion project just yet. So how is it now being with this project that's been kind of in various forms of screenwriting to now over the past 7 years? Does he have, do you all have more invested in it?
Yeah, I mean, knowing how much they poured into this one was very, to get it to the point where they could get it produced. I'd heard about it for years before. I never thought I'd end up being Ma George, that I knew him and I knew Darcy Pickholt, who had, sourced the story and had it for so long. And then her and him started to work together and worked here. And so I knew there was such a history behind it. So it was such an amazing honor to be asked to do it, and it was very, very, you really wanted to bring life to it in a way that, they'd envisioned and beyond, because how much has been poured into it. But in terms of like his aesthetic and his ideas and his desires to bring African stories to the contemporary audience, I found that to be something very, very appealing to me, obviously, because as I'm a playwright, and as an African woman, I've always been very interested in those ideals. So it felt like a kindred spirit thing, both with him and with Darcy.
So you spent a lot of time growing up in Zimbabwe. Isaach, obviously, born in the Ivory Coast, Nigerian background before that. But now, is there a sense, and Andrew's got that story too, and of course Restless City was a Senegalese guy in New York City, and it was very much an immigrant tale. Do you feel that you've ever had to kind of compromise your culture in order to pursue your dreams?
I don't know, but on this particular project, I met Andrew like 14-something years ago, and the first time we met, we wanted to work together. That's how we met, because we have a friends in common, and say, "Oh, I love your work, and I would love to make a movie with you." And it took 14 years, but you got to find the right material. In the meantime, we became friends. I was following his work, as on a video, also his installation as a photographer.
Yeah.
And I really like his aesthetic, as she said. For me, it was, if I had to work someday with an African director, he was one of them, because I know a lot of them, even the late Samen Usman.
Yeah.
But in terms of compromise, I think he got the right thing, because this story is, as Danai said yesterday, all over across Africa, it's a similar story. It's a foundation. When I was a child, for example, I have an uncle who has 2 wives, and he never had a baby with those 2 wives. He has younger wife, maybe 30 years younger than him, and all of a sudden they have a child. So, but everybody in the house, knew something happened there, but it was kind of kept in the family.
And of course, when you take that context and you put it in a Western setting.
Yeah, when you take that context and you put in a Western city, you have a parallel on the other side. You can sell your sperm, or to people. Is it better to do that way, or is it better to have people meeting? Because sometimes you end up with a drama.
Yeah.
I heard lately somebody gave his sperm to a father who passed away, and now he's reclaiming his son.
Yeah.
So it's not unusual in a Western, civilization as well to have this kind of story.
Yeah.
It's only African way. It's just he has to be known, and the family has to be kept, secret.
Yeah. And Danai, did you know much about this kind of story? Was it familiar to you as well, or was this something that you learned via the screenplay, via working with Andrew? What these people
Well, here's the irony. The story, the actual tradition is actually largely rooted in my people. It's actually a Shona tradition, which has a lot to do with the idea of continuing the lineage. So even if a father dies and his wife dies, and there's a girl who's next in line in her family, she then might become the wife, traditionally. Right. And, there are lots of things that resulted in that, especially during the colonial time, where girls would flee to the church if they didn't want to become a wife. And, all these different things started to happen as a result of those traditions. So they are very broken down now, and they don't happen that much anymore. But the actual, in terms of, if we go to the core tradition, it's actually very Shona. Right. And she actually got it from a Zimbabwean woman. Darcy. She got the story from the Zimbabwean. They adapted it to Nigeria. Right. So actually, it's bizarrely close to my people. But I did learn that later on. I knew about the other stuff, but it was actually really only the day before we started shooting. I talked to my cousin who's like 50 years old, and I asked her about these ideas. She was with her and her two buddies were on like this "we're going to New York" weekend, and so they're both also Zimbabweans in their 50s, and they started to relay stories. Oh, there was a next door neighbor we had. Everyone knew that the father was not the father, and that it was actually the uncle's kids, but and the kids never knew, and no one talked about it. And I was like, I hadn't even told them the premise yet. I just started asking about these different like how do you deal with fertility in our culture. Yeah. So it was really kind of like, oh my gosh, I had no idea how close this was to my own people.
And you were born in like Iowa or something, right?
I was born when my father was a professor, which was Grinnell College, Grinnell, Iowa. Yeah. And then
How old were you when you moved back to?
I was 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, in the modern setting, it's not like something you come across. Right. I grew up in Harare, which is the capital city. Yeah. And it's not something you're going to come across all the time. It's something that, as I think that's a great point Isaach made, that there's so many different ways that people make sure that they have children these days, very much in the Western context. And I think to answer your earlier question, that kind of stems in because sometimes we want to exoticize Africa to a real far extent. Yeah. But it's like when you really break it down, like it's like this isn't really that different from what folks will go through to have a child in the United States. Yeah. But in terms of the compromise, and this project is a dream come true type project. But then there are other projects where it's not projects, but like things I've read or been approached about, where I don't feel right about how the artist or the filmmaker or the playwright or whoever they are trying to portray the continent, because it's not complex, it's not holistic. Generally it might have a Caucasian hero or heroine, and the Africans are the subjects who are being objectified. And unfortunately that is a trait we sometimes see in some of the output, and it's like really kind of absurdly outdated to still make things like that. I think, because I'm like, really, the African can speak for themselves, and it's okay to let an African be the front and center. So when you start to see films like that start to emerge, which is starting to happen especially in the United States, I think we need to start letting that happen more.
Especially the work your DP has done over the last few years, like Middle of Nowhere, which played here, Pariah that played here as well. And so you start.
But even work from the African perspective, the African perspective is often really kind of it gets exoticized to the point where you know, the leads of the film are often not even African, but it's about Africa, you know, great backdrop, you know, and you know, and it's all about the struggle of the Western protagonist. So tired of that. Let's like let Africans tell their stories.
Yeah.
So,
Is this kind of the perfect hybrid career you have right now, working on like a hit TV show like Walking Dead during the year, then being able to kind of pour yourself into, you know, something you are and seem to be super passionate about in kind of your off space?
yeah, but I mean, The Walking Dead, I mean, the fact that it's a hit's great. But I mean, I didn't get into it because it was a hit or not. I got into it because I actually really saw a great number of parallels between how dire that world is and like worlds I've had to research, like Liberian women in war, like the way when I went to Liberia to research the play I was writing, like the way who you become when everything shuts down. You know, and I thought that was very interesting about The Walking Dead. Like, people have to become something else. Don't think you're going to be the same as you are right now. And that was kind of the premise I kept coming across, looking at people who had to adapt to the most dire war zone you can imagine. So I really got it. I actually felt it really linked in, bizarrely, artistically, for me to step into something like The Walking
Dead. In fact, it's kind of how Andrew describes the film. It's like, what would you risk everything for? You know, and it takes that situation where you're being pushed to the brink of having nothing, or being forced to have nothing, that you can take that chance, because where else are you going to go?
Right, exactly.
What is it about Andrew that has kind of captivated this, you know, people call it a poetic or a magic, and I think for me it's like the photography, like his photography, that eye, that he's able to kind of almost majestically manufacture these worlds.
But also is a willingness not to be judged as an African photographer or as an African artist, but just as an artist.
Right.
Which I think all of us, you know,
Desire,
because I want to be judged, you know, as an actor, not as an African actor, you know. So I've done, you know, different kind of movie, worked with different kind of directors, and
Jim Jarmusch is as far from an African director.
Yeah, you know, but by the way, we all come from Africa, because it's a motherland. So anyway, just to say that it's freshness and fulfilling to find on the other side, you know, a director or, you know, who understands that and who's at the same mindset with us, and it's a great journey.
Yeah, and what was that also, you reuniting with Tony Okambawa for this as well?
No, it was great. It was great. It was great. He's such a different character in Restless City than he is in this show, which is really a real testament to his abilities. But it was fun. We had a lot of fun in Restless City, and we had a lot of fun in this. But it was such a different dynamic between our two characters, between those two films, which was really it's really, really fun.
Very cool. Well, we appreciate you coming by and spending a few minutes with us, and congratulations on the success of the film so far.
Thank you.